Hello, it's Javon Jones with Jones Community Solutions, and I have the best part two ever with Laura Van Tosh. We were really in depth with some policy, and she is going to elaborate a bit more on something else that's very important. The floor is yours, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Javon. First, I just want to say how much it means to me that you're doing what you're doing, that you're talking with people in the community and sharing it out, and and that while you're doing it too, you're learning, and then you're sharing, and that's really part of the equation here is, people who are most impacted having a chance to listen and then transfer, and then bring that information back out to the community. And so thank you for inviting me to be a part of your adventure on tape.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Really happy to be here. And I think the most important message that I really want to convey is how crucial it is for us to be at the table. And what I mean by the table could really mean anything and to anyone, so use your imagination, but I'm really talking about decision making and policy making, change making, personal change as well as community change, and that we all have to really be present for that. And and there also are some steps before you can actually get at the table and do that. And part of it is really getting organized. And I talk about, quote, getting organized. And I think getting organized to me means aligning people together under a vision or a goal. It could be, shades of gray where the goal or the vision can be very personal to individual people, but coming together, there's actually an agenda to go forward, with just about anything. So I think it's really important that people know that there are shades of gray, and that, but together as a unit, we can take one step forward and make a difference, even in that gray area, if you will. And that, in other words, that not all people have to agree with every single thing, but if we agree that, we need to either take a step forward or make a particular kind of change, that people could come together and try to do that. And I say that mostly because in Washington State, and at least where I'm living, which is an urban area, I'm in Seattle, and there's a lot going on and a lot of views and opinions and action underway, that sometimes it can be difficult to do that because people are moving in very many different directions. But in our area of the world, which is at least the area that you and I know each other from, is the behavioral healthcare advocacy community. And that community has a lot of challenges, and I would include also people who are homeless within that community, are larger. Sometimes the circles get a little bit larger because there's more people that we touch in terms of behavioral health care. And so it can be difficult to come together on single issues, but for the most part, people do their best. I mean, I'd say that a lot of people come together on housing. That's kind of a central issue. There's not a lot of gray area there. People pretty much agree that having a place to live promotes recovery, increases the likelihood of living a healthier, longer life, the ability to actually be a part of a community. When you have a place to live, you're part of a community. You're living in a neighborhood. And so those things are pretty basic that I think a lot of people, tend to agree with. And I think more than anything, rather than kind of agree or disagree here, I think my main focus is simply getting to the table to have those dialogues of whatever the issues happen to be. And so it's important that we're inclusive, that we invite different points of view, that we encourage differences among our perspectives, um, uh, not only in the types of people that are engaged in these kinds of activities, but even the directions forward. Because every group is going to have possibly a different way of looking at it. And so in my world, this is sort of a big introduction, but in my world, in terms of being at the table, I do a lot of advocacy work with the disability community, which crosses a lot of gray area. It's a fairly big, population group, and with a number of issues, be it behavioral healthcare issues, people who are poor, people who are living in perhaps unhealthy or substandard housing, people that would like to be more educated, have work that's meaningful, that's definitely above minimum wage, and so on. So there are a lot of issues there, but in that world of disability, the history really, if you look, way far back, that, and really maybe not as far as we would like to look, is that people with disabilities often were never at the table, whatever decision-making table, including and most importantly, at the table where things were decided about their lives, or our lives and our healthcare and our lives, all the things needed to survive in the world. Those decisions were being kind of handed off to other people, and rarely, and I mean really historically, like 30, 40, 50 years ago, rarely included the person's viewpoints. And also too, with people with behavioral health care issues, there's a long history of people with mental health, mental illness that were rarely at those tables in terms of making decisions about healthcare, medication, perhaps, all kinds of things. I mean, that's when, in the old days, where things were really forced upon people rather than offered or agreed upon. So in the history of these, sort of parallel populations of disability and mental health, there's a lot of things in common. And so now, because of federal law, and which then becomes adopted by states and communities, and there's some technical ways that happens, but if there's a federal law about including people in their own decision making, it definitely feeds out to the states and then to the communities and then to facilities and programs, through regulation. And then finally to the person, that the person can become engaged. And so, like I said, without going deep into the history of these things, now, thankfully, and really over the last 20, 25 years, maybe a little longer, people have really recognized the value of this, that if we're at the table, especially around decision making for our own business, things are better. We're healthier, we're happier, we spend less time either in jail or in mental health programs or hospitals or nursing homes, and we spend more time most likely where we want to be, which would be most likely the community. most would choose perhaps that, for the most part. And so there's a movement, and there's been a movement for as many years as I've mentioned, at least 25, 30, if not longer, of people that have really struggled to make sure that this can happen. And it's taking a long time, but that is the nature of movements. These things don't happen overnight. We have to sometimes remind people that there's a law that says, you know, my friend Mary Jane can make a decision for herself, or I'm here to advocate because I'm a peer specialist. I'm not, but if I was, I'm a peer specialist for Mary Jane, and I'm here to support her to get what needs she expresses for herself. So there's much more going on in that regard today, which we're obviously grateful for. But now that many of us know that, or experienced it ourselves, and there's a lot of stumbling and tripping and falling. It doesn't always happen as easy as I've explained it. We realize, well, wow, if I can make some changes in my own life and speak up, then maybe I can make some changes in other people's lives. And maybe I can get involved in some of that lawmaking that's going on that affects huge groups of people, which really gets to legislation and gets to policy development, training and education. There's a whole umbrella of activities that could go on there. And in terms of really focusing on policy making and legislation, we need much more of that in Washington State. We need much more engagement by our government and leaders that are making decisions to bring us together with them and work together on promising legislation, promising program development, evaluation, research, all kinds of things. Now, we've done some of that here. It's not like nothing's happened, but it's been kind of a challenge because there's been a very big focus on mental health and disability issues, and there are government offices and entities and bureaus and commissions that do engage people with disabilities and people with mental health issues in some of these discussions. I'd say that the disability world, which again is that broader group, has done much more because I know people who are on numerous, committees and work groups and so on. And in terms of behavioral health care, which includes mental health and substance use disorder, there are some, government-led forums and committees, that people have been very active with and have become involved and tried to make change. But, we're all kind of sometimes in different directions even there. And where people are there by themselves as who they are, but not necessarily always representing a larger group. Like an organization might have an executive director, and that director would represent a larger group of people. And I think that we have more of those people now, but to what extent they represent other people, through a democratic process, I don't know. I think because there's a lot of communication that we may not always have. I know that our communication loops are a little bit more stunted, and not necessarily always organized. But there very well may be people that can say, I represent everyone in Seattle who has, cerebral palsy, or I represent everyone in Seattle who has suffered from schizophrenia. There may be people that can do that, but I don't know right now how often that happens. And I know that it would be helpful if more of that did happen, because then the state and the other people who bring people together would know that there's more than one person sitting in the room. There's,
I ask you a question.
of course,
When you're out there advocating for behavioral health issues, and you're like at the Capitol trying to get policy stuff, is there a shortage of people of color that do the work?
absolutely. And I should have emphasized that that is an issue. I wouldn't even call it an issue. It's the word issue sometimes. Um, the word issue is kind of nondescript and doesn't mean much. It is in our world, in our area, it is woefully underrepresented. In fact, and not just people who identify as Black or Indigenous, you know, or brown, etc. But very much so, and I know that has been a pretty big lapse, you know,
Um,
and
I've spent time down there trying to do my part with
yes,
you.
you have.
We've worked a lot there. As far as I can see, it's very rare. It's very underrepresented, and that makes it hard to have a voice at the table when decisions are being made for you as a group, as a whole. And then also the ones that we speak to, there's not that many people of color in office to help with that support as well. What can we do about that?
Well, you know, first of all, we broke some records in Washington State and have elected many new, uh, actually elected, I think, six or nine women of color to office here in Washington, and and the Black Caucus is, or People of Color Caucus, I'm trying to remember the exact name, is much larger, which is fabulous, and includes a multitude of cultures and people of color. But and that took a concerted effort. In fact, the last time you and I talked, I mentioned getting involved in certain people's campaigns because it was a way, as a private citizen, not part of the work I do, to get to know them. And I got involved with the group, a PAC, which is a political action committee, um, that was supporting those women. And the fundraising went to the women and the outreach went in their support. It was that's what a political action committee can do. It was like pooled resources. And I not only had a blast, but I met some fabulous people, and I helped, you know, I did some fun work that I never had done before.
And
And
it's historic, and you were part of it,
I loved it. And I was background.
right?
In the foreground were these, I mean, obviously I wasn't running for office, but in the foreground were these amazing women with incredible backgrounds running for office. And I was just thrilled. And I knew that it would be historic. I knew that there was some power behind the idea of bringing forward a group of people. Um, and you know, and actually, one of the representatives who won, Kirsten Talley Harris, she was one of the women that that won a seat, a state representative seat, and she's one of my representatives in my community. So that was good, you know. So I met, you know, and so these things really, you know, parlay into other, you know, hopefully hopeful actions in the future. And there are now, because we have an election coming up in about a week.
Mhm.
So, and there's a flood of people of color running.
Gosh, I have some more friends that's running for office. Like we work with Jaya Paul, Savant, Lauren Davis,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody. So now another one of my mentors is Lance Randall. He's running for Seattle mayor, and
Yes.
I'll be interviewing him soon. I think I'll be interviewing him next week. Just
Okay.
confirming the schedule. I'll be interviewing Lauren as well.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
we
there's
do
a
that work,
variety.
they need to know that there's other ways to provide the service and not just advocating for someone at a behavioral health office. There's policies and legislative things that need to be done, and a lot can be done at a grassroots level.
Yes. And that's really where you and I come in, because you have a chance at the grassroots, which is, the closest you can be to anything, is at the grass level, to sit down with someone and talk with them. And
Mhm.
then you're sharing it through this technology. And so you're kind of talking to a lot of other people. And that's why I'm so encouraging about what you're doing. And I say, stay with it. This is a chance for people to be heard, and then the people who you're inviting as guests, they want to be heard. It works.
It's a win-win. It's a win for me. It's a win for the guests because we learn from each other. We get to share, and then the community at this view and pleasure gets to also learn and share. So to me, this is what diversity and access looks like,
Yes.
and support as well. And
Yeah.
that's why I appreciate you being here with me today. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Laura Van Tosh.
Absolutely. Thank you. Was that the end?
Yep.